the Buddha. N. The Noble Eightfold Path. Tien Cong Tran, Ph.D. The Noble Eightfold Path is the noble path with 8 branches to the other shore. The 8 branches are right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Going to the other shore is not an easy task. We should remember the saying of Confucius, "The way which the superior man pursues reaches wide and far, and yet is secret." Common men and women, however ignorant, may intermeddle with the knowledge of it, yet in its utmost reaches, there is that which even the sage does not know. Common men and women, however much below the ordinary standard of character, can carry a part of it into practice, yet in its utmost reaches, there is that which even the sage is not able to carry into practice. More than anybody else, the Buddha saw that difficulty. He discussed the hindrances for the way of deliverance. There are many hindrances, but 5 main ones are sensual desire, hatred, sloth, and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. Man is an animal that relates to 2 different realities, material and non-material. He tends to follow material, but his heart loves non-material or the way. Therefore, we can say that there is a fight between following material and following the way. Material and the way are 2 different masters of man, and man, in Jesus' words, is not able to serve both masters. He cannot serve both God, the way, and money, material. Material has its own attraction, and the way has its own voice, call. When man wants to go to the other shore, material pulls him back. We should remember that material is the evil one, and thus it has numerous ruses. In our present time of technology, the evil one prevails, and the way, spirit, God, is only a vague image in the mist. The basket of discourses talks about numerous paths to the other shore. The Noble Eightfold Path is one of those paths. It is the most notable and most complete one, for it is mentioned in the Buddha's first sermon setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma. Chapter 1. The Middle Way. Beginning his first discourse setting in motion the wheel of the Dhamma, the Buddha said, "Bhikkhus, these 2 extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness." What are the 2? The pursuit of happiness in sensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, inferior, ignoble, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, ignoble, unbeneficial. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has discovered the middle way, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. And what is the middle way? It is simply the Noble Eightfold Path: right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. This, Bhikkhus, is the middle way discovered by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to knowledge, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, to enlightenment, to Nibbana. The middle way is between 2 extremes, between sensual pleasures and self-mortification. So first, what are sensual pleasures and self-mortification? We use the life of the Buddha before his going forth into homelessness as symbol of a life in sensual pleasures. I was delicately brought up, O Bhikkhus, highly delicate, exceedingly delicate was my upbringing. At my father's house lotus ponds were made, in one of them blue lotuses bloomed, in another white lotuses, and in a third red lotuses, just for my enjoyment. I used only sandal unguent from Benares, and my head dress, my jacket, my underground, and my tunic were made of Benares muslin. By day and night, a white canopy was held over me, lest cold and heat, chaff, or dew should trouble me. I had 3 palaces, one for the summer, one for the winter and one for the rainy season. In the palace for the rainy season, during the 4 months of rains, I was waited upon by female musicians only, and I did not come down from the palace during these months. While in other people's homes servants and slaves receive a meal of broken rice together with sour gruel, in my father's house they were given choice rice and meat. In fact, a life does not need to be as luxurious as the Buddha's to be considered a life of sensual pleasures. To live a life of sensual pleasures is to seek pleasures in the material shore. When a person lives without any care of morality or the other shore, he lives in sensual pleasures, even thought he is poor and cannot have a life like the Buddha's. Self-mortification is leaving the worldly life to live an ascetic's one. It often is to leave the household life to go into homelessness, for it seems that the way, as a reality that is different from material, is in austerity. There were numerous people who believed that an ascetic life led to the way. The Buddha himself, at the beginning of his noble search, followed an austere life. At that time there were many ascetics. Alarika Lama, the first teacher of the Buddha, was a distinguished ascetic. To gain a look into an ascetic life, we can read the story told by the Buddha about austerities he experienced. Sariputta, I recall having lived a holy life possessing 4 factors. I have practiced asceticism, the extreme of asceticism. I have practiced coarseness, the extreme of coarseness. I have practiced scrupulousness, the extreme of scrupulousness. I have practiced seclusion, the extreme of seclusion. Such was my asceticism, Sariputta, that I went naked, rejecting conventions, licking my hands, not coming when asked, not stopping when asked. I did not accept food brought or food specially made or an invitation to a meal. I received nothing from a pot, from a bowl, across a threshold, across a stick, across a pestle, from 2 eating together, from a pregnant woman, from a woman giving suck, from a woman lying with a man, from where food was advertised to be distributed, from where a dog was waiting, from where flies were buzzing. I accepted no fish or meat. I drank no liquor, wine, or fermented brew. I kept to 1 house, to 1 morsel. I kept to 2 houses, to 2 morsels. I kept to 7 houses, to 7 morsels. I lived on 1 saucerful a day, on 2 saucerfuls a day, on 7 saucerfuls a day. I took food once a day, once every 2 days, once every 7 days, and so on up to once fortnight. I dwelt pursuing the practice of taking food at stated intervals. I was an eater of greens or millet or wild rice or hide parings or moss or rice bran or rice scum or sesamum flour or grass or cow dung. I lived on forest roots and fruits. I fed on fallen fruits. I clothed myself in hemp mixed cloth, in shrouds, in refuse rags, in tree bark, in antelope hide, in strips of antelope hide, in kusagrass fabric, in bark fabric, in wood shaving fabric, in head hair wool, an animal wool, in owl's wings. I was one who pulled out hair and beard, pursuing the practice of pulling out hair and beard. I was one who stood continuously, rejecting seats. I was one who squatted continuously, devoted to maintaining the squatting position. I was one who used a mattress of spikes. I made a mattress of spikes my bed. I dwelt pursuing the practice of bathing in water 3 times daily including the evening. Thus, in such variety of ways I dwelt pursuing the practice of tormenting and mortifying the body. Such was my asceticism. Such was my coarseness, Sariputta, that just as a bole of a tinduka tree, accumulating over the years, cakes and flakes off, so too, dust and dirt, accumulating over years, caked off my body and flaked off. It never occurred to me, oh, let me rub this dust and dirt off my hand, or let another rub this dust and dirt off with his hand. It never occurred to me thus. Such was my coarseness. Such was my scrupulousness, Sariputta, that I was always mindful in stepping forwards and stepping backwards. I was full of pity even for the beings in a drop of water. Let me not hurt the tiny creatures in the crevices of the ground. Such was my scrupulousness. Such was my seclusion, Sariputta, that I would plunge into some forest and dwell there. And when I saw a cowherd or a shepherd or someone gathering grass or sticks, or a woodsman, I would flee from grove to grove, from thicket to thicket, from hollow to hollow, from hillock to hillock. Why was that? So that they should not see me or I see them. Just as a forest-bred deer, on seeing human beings, flees from grove to grove, from thicket to thicket, from hollow to hollow, from hillock to hillock, so too, when I saw a cowherd or a shepherd. Such was my seclusion. After 6 years of austerities, including the time with Alarikalama and Udakaramaputa, the Buddha did not attain the supreme state of the sublime peace. He abandoned the life of austerities that the recluses of that time considered as necessary to reach the goal. Was there any other way? The Buddha narrated, I recall that when my father the Sakyan was occupied, while I was sitting in the cool shade of a rose apple tree, quite secluded from sensual pleasures, secluded from unwholesome states, I entered and abided in the first absorption, jhana, which is accompanied by applied thought and examination, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion. Could that be the path to enlightenment? Thus, the Buddha saw that when he had not yet left the home life and had not yet lived through austerities, he had been able to escape from sensual pleasures and unwholesome states and to enter and to abide in the first absorption, jhana, which is accompanied by applied thought and examination, with rapture and happiness born of seclusion from the material shore. The Buddha decided to stop starving. He ate again, even though it was only some boiled rice and porridge. The 5 bhikkhus who were waiting upon him were disgusted and left him. They thought the recluse Gotama had given up his striving and reverted to luxury. When he was enlightened, the Buddha declared the middle way. So, what is the middle way? The middle way is not to live a worldly life and not to live an ascetic life. How is not to live a worldly life? Not to live a worldly life is, like the Buddha's experience in his above-mentioned narration, is to be secluded from sensual pleasures and unwholesome states. To live on this shore but not to seek the pleasures of this shore, which typically are gambling, drinking, sex, and smoking, and not to commit unwholesome states born from the clinging to this shore, which typically are telling lies, taking what is not given, killing and sexual misconduct. How is not to live in austerities? Not to live in austerities is not to mortify the body as starving, wearing ragged clothes, sleeping on a thorny bed, living in complete seclusion. The middle way is the way of living on this shore to keep a healthy body and to live on the other shore by cultivating and entering its holy joy and happiness. Thus, the middle way is the harmony between the material shore and the non-material shore. The material shore becomes the place of the appearance of the way. The middle way leads to Nibbana. So, according to the middle way, does one need to leave the household life to go forth into homelessness? The household life has numerous bindings and duties, and so it is a hindrance to the travel to the other shore. Homelessness has no bindings, and so it facilitates the travel to the other shore. However, the homeless life has its own difficulties. Because man tends to cling to the worldly pleasures, it is hard for him to escape from them. To escape from those pleasures, the homeless life requires a certain rule, for example eating only once a day and sleeping alone. These rules can be explained as sacrifices or severities of morality. Indeed, they are not sacrifices or severities of morality, they only assist in going to the other shore or in a happier life. One of the great impediments to the journey to the other shore is envy. The household life has, if the matter is considered in the sphere of family, less envy than the homeless life. Love between the family members is natural or inborn. Those who live together in homelessness do not have such love, and envy among them often takes place. Rank and fame are always baits to numerous recluses. The story that Huineng was obliged to flee the persecution of jealous elitists is a typical example. Then recluses watch this shore with covetous eyes. And in fact, numerous recluses live very much according to this shore, including sexual affairs. It always happens in all places that numerous recluses like the forbidden thing. To abandon the household life is good for the travel to the other shore, but it is not a necessary thing that is unavoidable. To abandon this shore is a necessary thing that is unavoidable. A person who lives a household life is also able to abandon this shore, and a recluse is also able not to abandon this shore. To go forth into homelessness was encouraged by the Buddha. However, Confucius said, the way of the superior man is found, in its simple elements, in the relation of husband and wife, but in its utmost reaches, it shines brightly through heaven and earth. Chapter 2. Right Speech. Speech is a daily phenomenon. The mistakes in speech are the easiest to be made. In comparison with action, speech is often said to be less dangerous. But a word can make a nation collapse and a citadel fall down. Right speech contains abstaining from telling lies, abstaining from slander, abstaining from harsh speech, and abstaining from idle chatter. 1. Abstaining from telling lies. Here someone avoids false speech and abstains from it. He speaks the truth, is devoted to truth, reliable, worthy of confidence, not a deceiver of people. Being at a meeting, or amongst people, or in the midst of his relatives, or in a society, or in the king's court, and called upon and asked as witness to tell what he knows, he answers, if he knows nothing, I know nothing, and if he knows, he answers, I know, if he has seen nothing, he answers, I have seen nothing, and if he has seen, he answers, I have seen. Thus, he never knowingly speaks a lie, either for the sake of his own advantage, or for the sake of another person's advantage, or for the sake of any advantage whatsoever. Lying is heavenly condemned by the sage. Jesus said, let your yes mean yes, and your no mean no. Anything more comes from the evil one. Why should one not lie? Because the way is sincerity. Lying is contrary to the way. One lies because one wants to gain some profit on the material shore. Lying is founded on this shore. In the shore of the way there is no lying. Why is that? It is such. In social life, the court is the place where mistakes and disputes are handled. The Buddha accepted no false witness. But one is not a false witness only when one bases on the way. Today the way has faded away, how might there be no false witness? If life is based on profit, how can judges make no false judgments? Professional false witnesses can become a fact. This world is evil. Its nature is lying. Whoever is on this shore is lying. If we want to abstain from lying, we must go to the other shore. 2. Abstaining from slander. He avoids slanderous speech and abstains from it. What he has heard here he does not repeat there, so as to cause dissension there, and what he has heard there he does not repeat here, so as to cause dissension here. Thus, he unites those that are divided, and those that are united he encourages. Concord gladdens him, he delights and rejoices in concord, and it is concord that he speaks by his words. Slander originates from hatred. Hatred is accompanied by envy. On the material shore there is rivalry. Everyone wishes others to be lower and smaller. Slander aims at belittling others, especially among the multitude. Dissension lowers the value of a person. Confucius said, "To hear something in the street and tell it along the road is to cast away virtue." But on the shore of the way dissension is replaced by concord. Concord is all-embracing. Lao Tzu said, "If one knows the constant way, one is all-embracing." The way destroys the differences between people. The way blunts all sharp edges, it unties all tangles, it harmonizes all lights, it unites the worldly dusts. A person who has reached the other shore rejoices in the concord between people. Whenever we intend to use slanderous speech, let us remember this saying of Confucius: "The superior man helps others become good and does not help them become bad, the inferior man does the opposite." 3. Abstaining from harsh speech. He avoids harsh language and abstains from it. He speaks such words as are gentle, soothing to the ear, loving, such words as go to the heart, and are courteous, friendly, and agreeable to many. Harsh speech can be scolding, insult or sarcasm. Harsh speech aims at causing pain to others. Thus, the cause of harsh speech is hatred and jealousy. The inferior man or the man on this shore speaks to lower the value of others, while the superior man or the man on the other shore speaks to help others to advance. To remind us not to judge others, Jesus said, "Why do you notice the splinter in your brother's eye, but do not perceive the wooden beam in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, 'Let me remove that splinter from your eye,' while the wooden beam is in your eye? You hypocrite, remove the wooden beam from your eye first, then you will see clearly to remove the splinter from your brother's eye." 4. Abstaining from idle chatter. He avoids idle chatter and abstains from it. He speaks at the right time, in accordance with facts, speaks what is useful, speaks of the Dhamma and the discipline. His speech is like a treasure, uttered at the right moment, accompanied by reason, moderate and full of sense. Confucius also hated gossip. He said, "Those who herd together all day without talking anything about morality and love to display their petty cleverness are hard to teach." Idle chatter is often about mixed matters on this shore. In these chatters people seek relief in bragging speech that is not based on any foundation, they often criticize at random, and they avoid talking about the way because the discussions about the way often cause disputes. But the way is the root of man. In general, gossip keeps people on this shore. Thus, speaking according to Confucius, the virtuous man is cautious in his speech. Chapter 3. Right Action. 3 main actions to be avoided are killing, taking what is not given, and sexual misconduct. 1. Abstaining from killing. Herein someone avoids the taking of life and abstains from it. Without stick or sword, conscientious, full of sympathy, he is desirous of the welfare of all sentient beings. Killing is an action that religions and society forbid. Today numerous nations have given up death penalty. But killing in war is often considered reasonable and not contrary to morality. Indeed, according to the words of the Buddha and Jesus, it is against morality. The Buddha said, "Bhikkhus, even if bandits were to sever you savagely limb by limb with a two-handled saw, he who gave rise to a mind of hatred towards them would not be carrying out my teaching." Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, 'You shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy.' But I say to you, love your enemies, and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your heavenly Father, for he makes his sun rise on the bad and the good, and causes rain to fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love those who love you, what recompense will you have? Do not the tax collectors do the same? And if you greet your brother only, what is unusual about that? Do not the pagans do the same?" So according to the Buddha and Jesus, there is no reason to kill living beings, including enemies. Some national leaders bring troops to conquer, then on weekends go to temple or church. This is exactly like this: people honor me only with lip service, while their hearts are far from me. Those who take life are not disciples of the Buddha and Jesus. Why do they go to temple or church? The Buddha extended killing to taking life of living beings other than humans, to animals and insects. Speaking according to modern science, living beings also include bacteria and microbes. The view of the Buddha about living beings other than humans can cause a dispute. Because of living, people eat meat and fish. A devoted believer can reason that, according to the recurrent round, an animal can be your father, mother, brother, sister, relative, so when you kill and eat meat of an animal, you kill and eat your father, mother, brother, sister, relative. Another can give a contrary reasoning that, because according to the Buddha's teaching, animal life is lower than human life, to kill an animal is to liberate a lower life. Indeed, such a dispute can go on endlessly. The fundamental question is, why did the Buddha forbid the taking of life? The Buddha's aim was to seek happiness. Two noble and divine abodes, as we will say later, are loving-kindness and compassion. Living in loving-kindness and compassion brings happiness. We have loving-kindness and compassion for living beings. It seems that we do not have loving-kindness and compassion for vegetables. Killing living beings is contrary to loving-kindness and compassion and thus contrary to our happiness. Our mind is not of equanimity when we kill living beings. Particularly, the taking of human life causes resentment. And resentment belongs to this shore of suffering and not to the other shore of happiness. 2. Abstaining from taking what is not given. He avoids taking what is not given and abstains from it, what another person possesses of goods and chattel in the village or in the wood, that he does not take away with thievish intent. Taking what is not given is taking what belongs to another person without his consent. Thief and robbery are two typical actions of taking what is not given. However, taking what is not given can take place in numerous other forms and depending on views. Richness can be a kind of robbery. Lao Tzu said, "The court is extremely elegant, but the fields are extremely weedy and wild, and the granaries are extremely empty. They wear gorgeous clothes, they carry sharp swords, they surfeit themselves with food and drink, they possess more riches than they can use. This is boastful robbery. And it is indeed against the way. The class of the rich and the owners can be considered as the class of robbers. The court can be the place of legal robberies. Taking what is not given is a daily symbol of the quarrels and conflicts on the material shore. Therefore, in order for taking what is not given not to happen or seldom to happen, an equal society is a necessary condition. In the perspective of an individual, abstaining from taking what is not given is a demand or command. In the perspective of society, abstaining from taking what is not given becomes the task of organizing an equal society. 3. Abstaining from sexual misconduct. He avoids sexual misconduct and abstains from it. He has no intercourse with such persons as are still under the protection of father, mother, brother, sister, or relatives, nor with married women, nor with female convicts, nor lastly, with betrothed girls. Religions forbid sexual misconduct and society often judges it. Sexual desire is the most attractive on this shore. Going from the household life forth into homelessness is an ideal for the travel to the other shore. However, only few persons can practice it. Moreover, it happens that numerous recluses commit sexual misconduct. Jesus went farther to forbidding adultery in thought. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you, everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than to have your whole body thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than to have your whole body thrown into hell. Because sex is the most attractive on this shore, it must be a force that binds people to this shore. Today it is advertised that sex is life. Thus, Vigora can be the symbol of what is called present civilization. The Buddha and Jesus saw that hindrance. Sexual misconduct brings a lot of unwholesome things, including killing. It is the greatest hindrance to the journey to the other shore. How to avoid sexual misconduct? Maybe the only way is to teach to people that it is only an ignoble pleasure in comparison to the noble joy of the other shore. When people have not seen the noble joy of the other shore, it is hard for them to drop sexual desire. The knowledge of the twofold becomes important. To become a recluse does not mean that to know the twofold. There are persons who have gone forth into homelessness and then have babies. Where is the twofold for them? It is clear that they have not known the noble joy of the other shore. If they continue to teach the Buddha Dhamma, that is surely not the true Buddha Dhamma. If they proclaim that they are Buddhas, is there any name that is so false? Chapter 4. Right Livehood. Livehood indicates the way of living. Speech and action also belong to livehood. However, because of their importance, right speech and right action have been separately discussed above. Right livehood here indicates some traits and conducts. These 5 traits, O bhikkhus, should not be taken up by a lay follower: trading with weapons, trading in living beings, trading in meat, trading in intoxicants, and trading in poison. At the time of the Buddha, most people made their living by farming, cattle raising and trading. Those traits are ways of living of a few common people. In present society those 5 traits are popular. In some places people are proud of producing the most modern weapons and, because of that, proud of a good economy and many jobs. Is that a sign of the decadence of morality? Material or money reigns and morality declines. And what, bhikkhus, is wrong livehood? Scheming, sweet-talking, hinting, belittling, and pursuing gain with gain, usually this is wrong livehood. Scheming, for example, saying that one can work wonders or attain deep states of meditation, for example, pretending that one does not wish to receive alms and accepts only for the sake of the donors. Sweet-talking, pleasing donors so that they make a gift. Hinting, making hints and gestures so that offerings are made. Belittling, speaking words that are hard to hear so that a donor is obliged to give to get rid of the situation. Pursuing gain with gain, giving a small gift to get a bigger one. These 5 kinds of living are applied to common people as well as to recluses. They are based on profit. They are deceitful and contrary to the way. Chapter 5. Right effort. Man is born to relate to material and to the way. In his life, man tends to like material more than the way. Confucius said, "I have not seen one who loves virtue as he loves beautiful women." Jesus said, "Enter by the narrow gate, since the road that leads to destruction is wide and spacious, and many take it, but it is a narrow gate and a hard road that leads to life, and only a few find it." The Buddha himself saw the fallenness in man. When he was awakened, he tended not to teach the Dhamma because people delight in adhesion to sensual pleasures, take delight in adhesion to sensual pleasures, rejoice in adhesion to sensual pleasures of this shore. It is easy to talk, but hard to do. To reach Nibbana, the road has numerous difficulties. That is the reason why one can fall into doubt and retreat, especially when the Dhamma is not clearly presented, and faith is demanded. The Dhamma is unclear and nebulous, while this world is full of attractions. Therefore, effort is needed to achieve the journey to the way. And what, bhikkhus, is right effort? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu rouses his will, makes effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind and strives to prevent the arising of unarisen evil unwholesome mental states. He rouses his will, and strives to overcome evil unwholesome mental states that have arisen. He rouses his will, and strives to produce unarisen wholesome mental states. He rouses his will, makes effort, stirs up energy, exerts his mind and strives to maintain wholesome mental states that have arisen, not to let them fade away, to bring them to greater growth, to the full perfection of development. This is called right effort. 1. To prevent the arising of unarisen unwholesome states. Here, to prevent the arising of unarisen unwholesome states, it is often said about the overcoming of hindrances, especially 5 hindrances: sensual desire, hatred, sloth, and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. With the twofold, the problem becomes easy and clear, to know that on the other shore there are no unwholesome states and only on this shore there are unwholesome states. To prevent the arising of unarisen unwholesome states, let us think, speak, and act according to the other shore and not according to this shore. This shore has its own sensual pleasures. And these pleasures are easy to attain. The other shore is so vague. It is also said that it takes numerous years and even numerous lives to reach the other shore. The Buddha himself had renounced the world in many prior lives before he was awakened. If it is so, let me temporarily postpone the renunciation of the world. I will do it in the next life, and it is not late. I do not need to enter Nibbana right now. Nibbana is not yet seen, only sacrifice is demanded. Let us look at the twofold. It does not need to renounce the world in numerous lives. Indeed, the Buddha did not teach that it requires many lives. Let us stop attaching to the world, wash worldly dusts away, clean taints in our heart, and we will see the result immediately. A serene and peaceful horizon is opening, right here and now. 2. To abandon the arisen unwholesome states. If it is unfortunate that unwholesome states have arisen, know that they belong to this shore. Unwholesome are telling lies, rivalry, thief and robbery, war and sexual misconduct. We know that they originate from greed and hatred. They cause suffering. If we seek happiness, it is only because of foolishness that we do not abandon them. Regarding ordinary life, to abandon the arisen unwholesome states is to live with right speech, right action, and right livehood. 3. To arouse unarisen wholesome states. On the other shore there are wholesome states, and they originate from loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So, loving kindness, compassion, joy and equanimity are the first wholesome states to be arisen. From them arise other wholesome states as giving, generosity, helping to advance, consoling, sharing the Dhamma. These good things bring happiness. If we seek happiness, we must make them arise. We should remember that if we do not live in goodness, we are not happy. To live with a sincere heart is to live in peace. This is not a wish, but a fact. 4. To maintain and develop arisen wholesome states. This shore is the evil one. The evil one does not like wholesome states. He seeks to destroy them. Thus, we ought to fight against him. In the discourses, numerous times the evil one appeared to counsel the Buddha to abandon the holy life. The Buddha often told the evil one that he knew him, and at that time the evil one disappeared. We must know the danger of the evil one to maintain and develop arisen wholesome states. The way is a domain that is always open. According to Confucius, in its utmost reaches, there is that which even the sage does not know. However, the Buddha said that he reached the perfect enlightenment. But perfect, complete, might mean that he saw it was perfectly, completely, right like that, and might not mean that he knew the entire other shore. After having attained the enlightenment, he continued to meditate. He wanted to immerse deeply into the other shore. This means that he was not always entirely in the other shore. The other shore was a domain that was always open to him. Let nobody think that he knows the way completely. The maintenance and the development, through learning, search, discussion, of the way are always a task to be done. The more deeply we go into the way, the greater our happiness becomes. Confucius told the story of his learning. At 15, I had my mind bent on learning. At 30, I was established. At 40, I have no doubts. At 50, I knew the decree of heaven. At 60, my ears became responding to the way. At 70, I was able to follow my heart desire without overstepping what was right. We should have this attitude. If a man in the morning hear the way, he may die in the evening without regret. Is it not a joy to learn something and practice it daily? To maintain and to develop arisen wholesome states, we have to know the dangerous attractions of the evil one and the open domain of the way. Chapter 6. Right Mindfulness. Mindfulness is attentiveness or awareness, attentiveness to reality in order to have right view of reality. Because it aims at right view of reality, mindfulness is a fundamental concept of Buddhism. However, let us say again that the reality that the Buddha seeked is happiness. So, mindfulness is to find where there is happiness, and not to find a scientific reality. The foundations of mindfulness is the main discourse on mindfulness. It is the Discourse 22 in the long discourses and the Discourse 10 in the middle-length discourses. The discourse in the long discourses is more complete. The discourse is about mindfulness and its four objects. They are body, feelings, mind, and mind objects. If one practices the mindfulness of the four foundations, he will rightly see reality or the shore of suffering and the shore of happiness. When we say that mindfulness leads to the right view of reality, it means that ordinarily we are not mindful and thus we do not rightly see reality. For the Buddha, our wrong view of reality is that we see the place of suffering as place of happiness and do not see the place of happiness. The Buddha opened the discourse on mindfulness as follows. This is, bhikkhus, the only way to the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the attainment of the right path, for the realization of nibbana, namely, the four foundations of mindfulness. What are the four? Here, bhikkhus, a bhikkhu abides contemplating a body as a body, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating feelings as feelings, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind as mind, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. He abides contemplating mind objects as mind objects, ardent, fully aware, and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief for the world. So here mindfulness is an ardent, fully aware, and mindful one. Such mindfulness leads to putting away covetousness and grief for the world. Thus, he who practices mindfulness and does not overcome covetousness and grief for the world must know that he does not rightly practice mindfulness. Contemplating body as, in, at, on, body means contemplating body as, in, at, on, body, not as, in, at, on, something else. Section 1. The contemplation of the body. 1. Mindfulness of breathing. So he abides contemplating breathing internally, or he abides contemplating breathing externally, or he abides contemplating breathing both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in breathing its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in breathing its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in breathing both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is breathing is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating breathing as breathing. Breath is a symbol of life. Therefore, mindfulness of breathing has its importance. What does mindfulness of breathing show us about breathing? It shows us. Breathing arises and then dies, it is impermanent. If it is life, life is impermanent. Breathing is impermanent, so it is suffering. If we seek a perpetual happiness, we cannot find it in what is impermanent. Thus, it is possible to say that breathing is suffering, breathing is unable to bring a perpetual happiness. So breathing is selfless. If breathing is impermanent and suffering, I am not foolish to consider it as mine, myself, my life. The result of mindfulness of breathing is that we are unable to find a happy self in breathing. Therefore he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. This is also applied to all parts of the 5 aggregates or this shore. The result of mindfulness of breathing corresponds to the truth the twofold. That means at the same time that a person who understands the twofold does not need mindfulness of breathing any longer. Moreover, many persons, who practice mindfulness, because they do not do it right, do not get the above result. How many among those who practice mindfulness get the above result? In addition, the twofold is easy to see. Thus, the discovery of the twofold will lead people to the other shore in a much faster way. 2. Mindfulness of the bodily postures. 4 bodily postures are walking, standing, sitting and lying. So, he abides contemplating walking internally, or he abides contemplating walking externally, or he abides contemplating walking both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in walking its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in walking its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in walking both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is walking is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating walking as walking. It is the same with standing, sitting and lying. 3. Mindfulness of the bodily parts. The bodily parts are head hairs, body hairs, nails, teeth, skin, flesh, sinews, bones, marrow, kidneys, heart, liver, diaphragm, spleen, lungs, large intestines, small intestines, stomach contents, excrement, brain, bile, phlegm, pus, blood, sweat, fat, tears, grease, snot, spittle, synovial fluid, and urine. So, he abides contemplating hairs internally, or he abides contemplating hairs externally, or he abides contemplating hairs both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in hairs their arising factors, or he abides contemplating in hairs their vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in hairs both their arising factors and their vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there are hairs is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating hairs as hairs. It is the same with the other bodily parts. 4. Mindfulness of the 4 great elements. The 4 great elements are earth, water, fire, and air. So, he abides contemplating earth internally, or he abides contemplating earth externally, or he abides contemplating earth both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in earth its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in earth its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in earth both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is earth is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating earth as earth. It is the same with water, fire, and air. 5. Mindfulness of a corpse in a charnel ground. So, he abides contemplating a corpse internally, or he abides contemplating a corpse externally, or he abides contemplating a corpse both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in a corpse its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in a corpse its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in a corpse both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is a corpse is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating a corpse as a corpse. Mindfulness of a corpse, or a skeleton in a charnel ground, helps people easily abandon clinging to this world. It causes disgusting toward the body. Again, bhikkhus, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, 1, 2 or 3 days dead, bloated, livid, and oozing matter, a bhikkhu compares this same body with it thus: this body too is of the same nature, it will be like that, it is not exempt from that fate. Again, bhikkhus, as though he were to see a corpse thrown aside in a charnel ground, being devoured by crows, hawks, vultures, dogs, jackals, or various kinds of worms, a bhikkhu compares this same body with it thus: this body too is of the same nature, it will be like that, it is not exempt from that fate. Section 2. The contemplation of feelings. There are 3 principal types of feeling: pleasant feeling, painful feeling and neutral feeling. So, he abides contemplating pleasant feeling internally, or he abides contemplating pleasant feeling externally, or he abides contemplating pleasant feeling both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in pleasant feeling its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in pleasant feeling its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in pleasant feeling both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is pleasant feeling is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating pleasant feeling as pleasant feeling. Pleasant feeling is attractive and causes craving. Mindfulness of pleasant feeling leads to the knowledge that pleasant feeling is also impermanent, suffering, and so a happy self cannot be found in it. Mindfulness of pleasant feeling is important because it leads to a view that is different from the common view of people. Mindfulness of painful feeling helps a bhikkhu set aside suffering. His self does not lie in painful feeling, so why does he feel painful? It also helps him set aside hatred and ill will caused by suffering. Neutral or neither pleasant nor painful feeling cause the idea that this shore is indifferent and so does not encourage one to abandon the attachment to this shore. Mindfulness of neither pleasant nor painful feeling leads to the knowledge that the idea is caused by ignorance. This shore is the evil one, the fact cannot be different. Section 3. The Contemplation of Mind. A state of mind can be mind with greed, mind with hatred, mind with delusion, cramped mind, scattered mind, developed mind, undeveloped mind, surpassable mind, unsurpassable mind, freed mind. So, he abides contemplating the mind with greed internally, or he abides contemplating the mind with greed externally, or he abides contemplating the mind with greed both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in the mind with greed its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in the mind with greed its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in the mind with greed both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is the mind with greed is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the mind with greed as mind with greed. It is the same with the other states of mind. Section 4. The Contemplation of Mind Objects. 1. Mindfulness of the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are sensual desire, hatred, sloth, and torpor, restlessness and worry, and doubt. So, he abides contemplating sensual desire internally, or he abides contemplating sensual desire externally, or he abides contemplating sensual desire both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in sensual desire its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in sensual desire its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in sensual desire both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is sensual desire is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating sensual desire as sensual desire. It is the same with the other hindrances. 2. Mindfulness of the 5 aggregates. So, he abides contemplating the body internally, or he abides contemplating the body externally, or he abides contemplating the body both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in the body its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in the body its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in the body both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is the body is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the body as body. It is the same with feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness. 3. Mindfulness of the 6 bases. There are 6 internal bases: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. There are 6 external bases that are the objects of the 6 internal bases: form, sound, smell, taste, tangibles and mind objects. So, he abides contemplating the eye internally, or he abides contemplating the eye externally, or he abides contemplating the eye both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in the eye its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in the eye its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in the eye both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is the eye is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the eye as eye. It is the same with the other bases. 4. Mindfulness of the 7 factors of enlightenment. The 7 factors of enlightenment are mindfulness, investigation of reality, energy, rapture, tranquility, concentration, and equanimity. So, he abides contemplating mindfulness internally, or he abides contemplating mindfulness externally, or he abides contemplating mindfulness both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in mindfulness its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in mindfulness its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in mindfulness both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is mindfulness is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating mindfulness as mindfulness. It is the same with the other factors of enlightenment. 5. Mindfulness of the 4 noble truths. So, he abides contemplating the noble truth of suffering internally, or he abides contemplating the noble truth of suffering externally, or he abides contemplating the noble truth of suffering both internally and externally. Or else he abides contemplating in the noble truth of suffering its arising factors, or he abides contemplating in the noble truth of suffering its vanishing factors, or he abides contemplating in the noble truth of suffering both its arising factors and its vanishing factors. Or else mindfulness that there is the noble truth of suffering is simply established in him to the extent necessary knowledge and awareness. And he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. That is how a bhikkhu abides contemplating the noble truth of suffering as the noble truth of suffering. It is the same with the noble truth of the origin of suffering, the noble truth of the cessation of suffering and the noble truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. What does mindfulness of the body, of feelings, of mind, and of mind objects find so that it leads to the purification of beings, for the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, for the disappearance of pain and grief, for the attainment of the right path, for the realization of Nibbana? Every mindfulness sees that there is, for example, breathing. However, every mindfulness sees the arising factors and the vanishing factors of, for example, breathing. Arising and vanishing show impermanence of, for example, breathing. And what is impermanent is suffering, and so non-self. We, wisely, do not accept it as ours, ourself. That is the meaning of he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. Mindfulness shows this shore of the five aggregates is impermanent, so suffering and so non-self. But such seeing alone is not enough. Mindfulness still leads to seeing the other shore as the shore of happiness, Nibbana. Chapter 7. Right Concentration. Meditation contains mindfulness and concentration. Mindfulness leads to he abides independent, not clinging to anything in the world. It is also said to lead to the overcoming of sorrow and lamentation, to the disappearance of pain and grief, to the attainment of the right path, to the realization of Nibbana. However, mindfulness alone might not do the second job, or if it is the case, mindfulness is understood to also contain concentration and wisdom. Concentration continues the task of mindfulness to lead to entering the realm of meditation. Concentration is one-pointedness to the chosen object. But in mindfulness there is also one-pointedness to the chosen object. To distinguish them, we may say that concentration concentrates in leading mind into the realm of the other shore. Concentration is usually divided into concentration with serenity and concentration with insight. Indeed, insight leads to serenity and serenity is present only in insight. So, serenity and insight are two aspects of concentration, the distinction relies on the aspect that is chosen. Concentration is described as wholesome. It is said so to be distinguished from unwholesome concentration. A cat unifies its mind on a mouse because it wants to catch it. The concentration of the cat is not good. So only good concentration is aimed in meditation. Indeed, because concentration aims at abandoning this shore and entering the other shore, it is of course good. Section 1. Objects of concentration. There are 40 objects or places of work of concentration, each is chosen depending on each person. The 40 may be listed as follows. 10 Kajas, primary elements or qualities: earth, water, fire, air, the blue, the yellow, the red, the white, the light and the space. Bhikkhu Bodhi writes, each Kaja is a concrete object representative of the universal quality it signifies. Thus, an earth Kaja could be a disc filled with clay. To develop concentration on the earth Kaja, the meditator sets the disc in front of him, fixes his gaze on it, and contemplates earth, earth. 10 corpses, bloated corpse, livid corpse, festering corpse, cut up corpse, gnawed corpse, scattered corpse, hacked and scattered corpse, bleeding corpse, worm-infested corpse, skeleton. 10 recollections, the Buddha, the Dhamma, the Sangha, virtue, generosity, deities, death, body, breathing, peace. 4 sublime states, loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. 4 immaterial states, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception nor non-perception. 1 perception, perception of the repulsiveness of food. 1 analysis, analysis of the 4 primary elements. Section 2. Absorptions, jhanas, and attainments. Having led to the insight of, for example, earth, this shore, as impermanent, suffering and non-self, concentration leads to the insight of something other than earth, the other shore. Concentration leads to 4 absorptions, jhanas, and 4 attainments. 1. The 4 absorptions, jhanas, are the first absorption, jhana, the second absorption, jhana, the third absorption, jhana, and the fourth absorption, jhana. Among the 31 planes of existence, they are the planes of the fine material realm. 2. The 4 attainments are the base of infinite space, the base of infinite consciousness, the base of nothingness and the base of neither perception nor non-perception. Among the 31 planes of existence, they are the planes of the formless, immaterial, realm. Chapter 8. Right View. View is seeing, knowledge. Knowing suffering, knowing the origin of suffering, knowing the cessation of suffering, knowing the path leading to the cessation of suffering, that is right view. So right view is knowledge of the Four Noble Truths. Knowledge of the Four Noble Truths is knowledge of the entire Dhamma of the Buddha. The Discourse on the Right View, Discourse 9 in the middle-length discourses, discusses the main points, the wholesome and the unwholesome, nutriment and the Four Noble Truths. 1. The wholesome and the unwholesome. The Discourse on the Right View begins with the discussion of the wholesome and the unwholesome. Unwholesome are the actions rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion. They belong to this shore. The typical actions are killing living beings, taking what is not given, false speech, malicious speech, harsh speech and gossip. Wholesome is abstention from the actions rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion, abstention from killing living beings, from taking what is not given, from false speech, from malicious speech, from harsh speech and from gossip. Wholesome are non-greed, non-hatred and non-delusion. 2. Nutriment. There are 4 kinds of nutriment for maintenance of beings on this shore: physical food, gross or subtle, contact, mental volition and consciousness. With food arises pleasure, with contact arises pleasure, with mental volition arises pleasure and with consciousness arises pleasure. With the arising of pleasure there is the arising of craving. With arising of craving there is the arising of nutriment. With the cessation of craving there is the cessation of nutriment. How does the cessation of craving occur? That is to know that this shore is not the place of clinging. How can one know that? The path leading to such a knowledge is the Noble Eightfold Path. 3. The Four Noble Truths. The right view of the Four Noble Truths contains the right view of suffering, the origin of suffering, the cessation of suffering, the path leading to the cessation of suffering, and the subjects relating to the Four Noble Truths as aging, death, birth, being, existence, clinging, craving, feeling, contact, the 6 bases, mentality, materiality, consciousness, formations, ignorance and taints. Chapter 9. Right Thought. Indeed, view or knowledge is also thought. However, in right thought, thought signifies thought that guides life. Therefore, right thought can be right intention, right thinking. Right thought is right view applied into life. Right thought is good intention. The Bible says, when the Lord saw how great was man's wickedness on earth, and how every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil all the time, he regretted that he had made men on the earth, and his heart was grieved. Therefore, going to the other shore is the condition of right thought. So, to abandon this shore and to go to the other shore, what thought, what intention should man have? There are 3 thoughts: the thought of renunciation, the thought of goodwill and the thought of harmlessness. 1. The thought of renunciation. Renunciation is the renunciation of this shore, renunciation of desire, renunciation of craving and renunciation of clinging. To say renunciation of this shore often causes the protest that we cannot abandon this shore, we need this shore to live. Indeed, renunciation of this shore intends to say renunciation of the evil states arising from desire, craving, and clinging, evil states as lying, theft, and robbery, killing, sexual misconduct. The Buddha, like other sages, is intelligent enough to know that man needs this shore to live. They always tell man to give food to the hungry and drink to the thirsty. What they want is that this shore must become the place of the appearance of the other shore. That is the middle way. 2. The thought of goodwill. Goodwill exists only on the other shore. Confucius said, there are cases of superior men who do unbenevolent things, but there is no such a case as an inferior man who does a benevolent thing. The inferior man is the man of this shore. A man of this shore does a good thing, that does not happen. This shore is also named the evil one. To get good thought, one must go to the other shore. The Gospel according to Mark says, as Jesus was setting out on a journey, a man ran up, knelt down before him, and asked him, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus answered him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. God is the name of the good, the way or the other shore. The other shore alone is good." Even Jesus, if he wanted to become good, had to go to the other shore. There is no hatred on the other shore. The Buddha said, "Bhikkhus, even if bandits were to sever you savagely limb by limb with a two-handled saw, he who gave rise to a mind of hatred towards them would not be carrying out my teaching." 3. The thought of harmlessness. Harmlessness is an applied form of goodwill. Goodwill alone may not be enough to understand. Harmlessness is an actualization of goodwill. Harmlessness is promoted because the man of this shore does not help others to become good, but to become bad. Confucius said, "The superior man helps others to realize what is good in them, he does not help them to realize what is bad in them." The inferior man does the opposite. The man of this shore worries about harming others. If he helps them, he does it for the sake of his profit. When the profit comes to an end, he harms them. So, the intention of harmlessness exists only on the other shore. Even when someone causes harm to you, you should not cause harm to him. For what reason? Because there is no harmlessness on the other shore. Jesus said, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, offer no resistance to one who is evil. When someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other one to him as well. If someone wants to go to law with you over your tunic, hand him your cloak as well. Should someone press you into service for 1 mile, go with him for 2 miles. Give to the one who asks of you, and do not turn your back on one who wants to borrow. Only loving kindness can kill hatred." The Buddha said, "In this world hatred is never appeased by hatred, by non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is the law from the ancient time. If everybody follows the words of the Buddha and Jesus, does this earth not become Nibbana or the kingdom of heaven?" Chapter 10. The Noble Eightfold Path and the Twofold. So, the goal of meditation, mindfulness and concentration, is to help people to realize the two shores and then to quit this shore to go to the other shore, for this shore is suffering and the other shore is happiness. However, whether meditation brings that result or not is another question. There are meditators who never get that result. Therefore, it is said that meditation can take numerous lives. The reason why a meditator does not get enlightenment because his meditation is not yet enough, even including his meditation in his past lives. Maybe this is the way of reasoning that several teachers use to console their students who complain about the non-result of long meditation. Indeed, not only students but also teachers do not go to anywhere. A proof that meditation does not lead to enlightenment is Hindu meditation. As we have said, the Buddha denied Hinduism. Hinduism had existed a very long time before the Buddha, and there had been a very great number of meditators. Today mankind has come to the discovery of the twofold. This discovery was done by thought, not by meditation. The twofold clearly represents two shores. Two shores become easy to understand. Unwholesome states of this shore and wholesome states of the other shore also become clear and easy to understand. The twofold clearly represents the necessity of not only the way but also material, not only of material but also the way. It securely leads to the middle way because the middle way is the harmony between the way and material. To leave the household life to go forth into homelessness to follow the way is an easy task. But this may not be suitable to the multitude. Moreover, if everyone goes forth into homelessness, the earth will soon be absent of human beings. And gods may not accept this earth as their homeland, for they may like to drift in the sphere of bliss in the sky. To live a household life and to keep up with the way is much harder. However, it is the way we must follow. Having said that, we do not intend to deny meditation. We only want to remind about the non-success of meditation. Moreover, with a person who has known the twofold, meditation can still help him in his life on the other shore. The Buddha himself, after having reached the other shore, practiced meditation his entire life. So, meditation is not the sole way to the other shore. Moreover, history proves that few persons went to the other shore by meditation. Numerous famous meditators not only do not see the twofold but also lose all of it. How many recluses have gone to the other shore? Reading stories of meditation in China and Japan, we see too many meditators have fallen in perplexity, for they have not seen the twofold. The twofold will help a lot of people to go to the other shore.